In this video, we're going to be continuing looking at some of the historical elements of the English legal system, thinking more specifically about the Bill of Rights of 1689. We will explore the historical context, the Glorious Revolution and the events leading up to the Glorious Revolution, before thinking about what the Bill of Rights does, why the Bill of Rights is important, and the significance that the Bill of Rights has to this very day. We're still concerning ourselves with introductory content for the legal system, for the English legal system on the SQE specification. And so fundamentally then, what we did in the last lesson was spend some time talking about the history of English law up to the point of the Bill of Rights. We spoke a little bit about the Anglo-Saxon legal system, the importance of the communal system of law that existed during the Anglo-Saxon time. We then focused on the major inflection points in this history, starting with the Norman conquest in 1066, going through and looking also at things like Magna Carta, and also thinking about the development of equity alongside the development of the common law. Now, at the end of 1603, the point at which we see the end of the Tudor dynasty with the death of Elizabeth I, is a bit of a problem when we think about succession, because Elizabeth I has no heirs. She doesn't have any children, she's famously the Virgin Queen, and so the question of who then becomes the heir is a very important one. And the son of Mary Queen of Scots, James I, is the solution to that problem. They essentially borrow the monarchy from Scotland, so that James I is actually got two different titles. He's James VI, I believe, in Scotland, and he is James I in England. Now, James I isn't particularly controversial, but Charles I, his son, is very controversial, and we see an overthrow of the monarchy with a revolution and a civil war with Charles I being executed. After a period of Republican rule under the auspices of Cromwell, we then get the reign of Charles II, who is relatively uncontroversial, and then we get the controversial James II. Now, the reason why King James II is so controversial is because James II is a Catholic. Now, Charles II had sort of Catholic sympathies, and so caused quite a lot of issues with Parliament and with broader society for that reason. And we also get, during the reign of Charles II, something known as the Exclusion Crisis, where Parliament was very much in favour of excluding James II, who they knew to be a Catholic, from the throne. And Charles did not acquiesce, did not relinquish, and his brother James II therefore took the throne. Now, it wasn't very long before King James II tried to insert and try to put into the broader constitutional frameworks more and more Catholic ideas. And so he becomes deposed in what is now called the Glorious Revolution, in which the Protestant political leaders in Parliament invited both William of Orange and his wife Mary, James's daughter, to take the throne. It's called the Glorious Revolution, partly because it was relatively bloodless. No one was killed in this revolution, but also because it fundamentally settled what was, at this point, half a decade's worth of political turmoil, more than half a decade, at least 88 years of political turmoil, and revolution and civil war and overthrowing of monarchies. It was also very, very important in the sense that what happened is that when William and Mary accepted the throne, they did so on the condition that they agreed to a number of certain legal restrictions. The Convention Parliament, so called because it wasn't formally summoned in the usual way, presented William and Mary with something known as the Declaration of Right. This was then and later enacted as the Bill of Rights. And so when we get the Declaration of Rights, it then becomes a formal statute in December 1689, getting royal assent. And so often cited in 1689, some of the legal sources do date back to 1688, but again, it's not particularly relevant, the exact date for you to understand. What's more relevant is what the Bill of Rights did. Well, what it does is it enshrines a number of constitutional and civil rights. It presented a limit on monarchical power. It noted that the monarch cannot just suspend laws that are passed by Parliament. The monarch cannot levy taxes or raise revenue by way of the prerogative without the granting of Parliament, without Parliament's consent. This secures, by the way, Parliament's control over taxation. The maintenance of a standing army during peacetime cannot be done without parliamentary consent. And there was also the restriction by the Bill of Rights of something known as dispensing power, the idea that the king or queen cannot just ignore or dispense with statutes that are passed by Parliament unilaterally. It also provided for a number of parliamentary rights, the free elections of members of Parliament, the freedom of speech that existed within Parliament, parliamentary debates, the frequent parliaments. The bill declares that parliaments ought to be held frequently to address grievances and legislate, and also the right to petition. Subjects have the right to petition the monarch. Prosecution for petitioning are declared, therefore, illegal. It also provided a number of different individual rights, so things like excessive bail or excessive fines. The bill declares that all grants and promises of fines or forfeitures before conviction are illegal and void. It grants Protestants the right to have arms suitable to their condition. It's important to note, however, this is not a universal right. It's one that was limited specifically to that of Protestants. Jury trial in treason cases, prohibition of certain courts as well, things like the Court of Commissioners for ecclesiastical purposes also was outlawed. It also then protected the idea of succession. One of the issues that really brings the Glorious Revolution into fruition in the first place is the issue of succession and the issue of exclusion, the attempt to try and exclude James II from taking the throne and being overruled by Charles II in that particular decision. The Act settles the succession to the throne, noting that only Protestants could succeed to the throne, reflecting a very strong anti-Catholic political sentiment at the time. The monarch was also required to take a new coronation oath, swearing to govern according to the statutes in Parliament agreed on, and symbolising again the supremacy of parliamentary lawmaking. The reason why then this is so important is not necessarily for the individual rights that existed or that were enshrined. We have things like the European Convention these days that are a little bit more up to date, but it is more to do with the fact that it led to the establishment of a constitutional monarchy. The Bill of Rights is one of these foundational documents that establishes the idea of constitutional monarchy in England. The idea that there is no longer absolutism. The monarch is not absolute in their power. They do not have arbitrary power. They are limited in the power of their abilities, making royal authority conditional on Parliament. And by extension, it formalises the principle of parliamentary sovereignty, that Parliament is sovereign over all other things, over the common law and over the royal prerogative, especially in areas such as lawmaking, taxation, and military power. And then finally, it reinforces principles of the rule of law. The Crown can no longer, for example, act entirely outside of the law or above the law in any meaningful way. And of course, some of these principles are still particularly relevant even to this day. There's still relevance and citations to the Bill of Rights to this day, but it also is something that informs some of the other Bills of Rights that exist in other jurisdictions, like, for example, the US Bill of Rights, which of course comes into fruition many years after this one.